Founder FM. You're listening to Founder FM with your host, Graham Brown.
My name is Graham Brown, and today we're talking to Heine Nzumafo. He's the CEO of FWIB, formerly Privy Mobile. It's a smartphone app. It allows users to chat, make audio and video calls, earn points while you do so. Chat with your friends with benefits. Heine, how are you doing?
I'm fine, Graham. Thanks so much for this opportunity.
Great.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. It's great to have you here. I think we've got a really interesting story to share with the listeners today. It's about your story, your journey as an entrepreneur. It's not very straightforward, your journey, is it? I think people are going to be interested in the challenges you've faced.
No, it's not. It's worth sharing, absolutely.
Well, let's start at the top. You're in US. Whereabouts are you based?
I'm based in Lansing, Michigan currently.
Right, but you're not born there, right? Where were you born?
No, I was born in Cameroon in West Africa and moved to New York in 1995. So I spent approximately half my life in the US. Right.
So you're born in Cameroon. I don't think many people know a lot about Cameroon, Heine. What can we tell the listeners about Cameroon that they might know?
Cameroon is right at the cusp of the West African, Central African region. It's about the size of California, and it has a population of about 22 million people. It's very small. It's predominantly French speaking, but about 20% speak English. I was raised speaking English, so English is my first language.
Got it. So you came to the States, and there's a point from where you are now. You're an entrepreneur running a startup, a mobile startup in the States, and there you were, a young 20-year-old coming to the US. What happened in between?
Well, when I came here, I knew I wanted to study engineering. I knew my brain was wired for technology. So I enrolled in SUNY University, it's the State University of New York. I studied electrical engineering, and I moved on to study a master's degree as well in electrical engineering. So I obtained my degree in 2002 at a time when we were really dealing with 9/11. The communications world was really struggling, and all of the jobs went towards defense and security. So I was unemployed for a while. The opportunity to join the Army came to me because I realized that a lot of the people that got the jobs I was seeking had Army experience or military experience. So I enrolled as an officer and served 7 years. During this time, I knew I wasn't going to spend my entire career in the Army. Not because it wasn't great, because I really loved it, but because the entrepreneur in me just kept ticking, one idea after the other, as to what I was really going to do.
Right. So there's a lot of interesting contrasts in your character and your story here. You are African by birth. Yes. You're living in America. You're a US Army captain, and you're an entrepreneur. How does that all sort of fit together when you talk to people? Do people get it when you talk to people?
People can relate to the service. They relate to being an officer. They relate to serving the Army. Some do not really relate to being of foreign descent and serving as an officer. They don't understand the process. And to those, I would have to explain. But generally, the response is positive because people do appreciate serving the country. It has helped. But even while I was in the service, just because I was wired differently, I almost did not fit in. I was told I could be, a general someday because of the way my mind worked. But I always had the question posed to me, what are you doing in the Army? Believe it or not, I was asked that question every day. What are you doing in the army? You
Right.
just don't think like an army person. And I would say, what does an army person think like?
But you were there for 7 years, right?
7 years, and it was very, very good. I would not change a single day of my time in the army. In fact, the only regret I have was not joining early.
Right. You said earlier about being wired differently. I'm curious to know how the army benefits or trains you as a startup founder. Because on the face of it, they seem like completely different worlds, right?
Yes.
Is there some kind of benefit that you can bring to being in the startup world that maybe people who went to, the traditional startup founder route, Stanford University, that kind of thing, don't have?
I would say it's thick skin. Everybody knows about thick skin, and everybody knows that you need it to be an entrepreneur. It is impossible to serve as an officer without thick skin.
Right.
You'll be chewed out in a flash. I developed that very quickly, not because I didn't have it, because the African background itself is very, very tough.
Right.
But because you are faced with people of various ranks, most of them higher than you have to do presentations to people who outrank you. There is just that level of fear that is eliminated completely. You can talk to anyone, any day, at any time. You should be prepared at all times. So those elements just prepare you to face adversity that you face in the entrepreneur world, in the startup world. And I've heard no, I've heard people turn me down. I've heard people say, you can't do this. I've heard people say, we don't like you. We don't like your idea. And it's really nothing new, because it's really part of the army culture to beat down on you.
Do you think a lot of these young startup founders could benefit from a little bit of boot camp?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
I believe that with such structure and rigor, it would help people last longer in the struggle to really get started. Because I have been going for over 4 years now since I left the army, and I'm really going through the exponential curve now, rising up. And if I really did not have the balance of the rigor of the African upbringing plus the military experience, I may not have lasted this long.
Right, I believe so. Is there anything that you do as, in your daily routine that you sort of learned from the army that perhaps, a startup founder could learn from, like how you organize your day or how you focus or anything like that? Anything that you can share with us?
The first thing that sticks to me is exercise.
Right.
It was part of a day in the army. And though I frequently engaged in sporting activities prior to joining the army, it was never really a part of my day. And now exercise, be it in the morning, in the afternoon, or at night, is an integral part of my day. I structure everything around that, and really boosts me when I am hitting a low spell. The concept of accountability as well. In the army, you're always accountable to someone. No matter how high you rise, you're accountable to someone. And as an entrepreneur, we lock ourselves in this space of, it is my baby and I'm accountable to no one. And when you have that mindset, you fall behind on what you really have to do. So it doesn't matter if I can find someone to do it on a monthly basis, weekly basis, or daily basis, based on what the target is. I will have that person to bench off my goals and basically hold me accountable informally.
That's invaluable, I think, in this space, isn't it? Let's talk
Absolutely.
about your journey as an entrepreneur in America in the startup scene. And I'm really interested in this story because it seems that even though the startup scene is very meritocratic in the fact that anybody can get involved, it seems that the most of the startups, most of the press coverage, most of the fame and the fortune goes to the Stanford graduates, those kind of startup founders. It's typically white or Asian kids from quite wealthy professional families. It seems to be a pattern that's emerged over the last couple of years. You seem to be everything that scene isn't, right, in terms of your background. And I find that really fascinating. Does that sometimes get to you? Do you sometimes feel, these guys have got it easy? How do you feel about that?
Most times it doesn't, but I'll tell you when it gets to me. When I read the news and I find out what's happening or who has raised X amount of money, it gets to me because I say, how in the world did these people raise $2 million for such a basic idea?
Lousy idea.
Yeah, lousy idea. It gets to me and I read, these people have raised $100 million for 5, 6, 7 angels and venture capitalists. And I just wonder, because I have met with many venture capitalists. I have met with many angel investors. And I have experienced the hesitation that they would show just because they are unfamiliar with my background or they are unfamiliar with my roots.
I think it's unfamiliarity, isn't it, rather than some kind of prejudice. They just don't know what box to put you in at this early stage, right?
Absolutely. I would say it's unfamiliarity. I don't take it negatively because there are people I meet that I'm just not sure of. It's just the way things are. Many of them are interested in my journey. They're interested in keeping tabs on me. And they are waiting for a point where they will be more comfortable to get on board. My success has to validate me. I cannot be validated by who I am based on my roots. My success has to validate me, which is why I just have to keep doing what I'm doing. And when the validation comes, then the mainstream would follow. I say it's like high school. The popular kid gets all the attention.
Right.
When one person gets on board with that kid, then everybody follows. It's the same in the startup community.
Very interesting point. So what keeps you going in the face of all this? Because I get the impression, Heine, that you're pretty headstrong. You're pretty tough. Obviously, the army training's been pretty good. You've got the African background. You're also wired a little bit differently. What keeps you going through all of this? Because you face a lot more challenges than the average entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And the challenges are daily. They've been constant. But I'm motivated by the fact that I've always wanted to make a difference. My self-worth doesn't come from the paycheck at the end of the month. It doesn't come from the material things that I possess. And because I'm not really tied to those needs, I can keep going knowing that success will come eventually. So the short-term satisfaction of being able to afford a brand new TV set or buying a new car or wearing flashy clothes, those do not appeal. And because I can actually live without those needs or wants, I can just keep going towards my ultimate objective.
I find that a lot in immigrant entrepreneurs, is that they have their priorities set differently to, let's say, the middle class kid entrepreneur who's probably come from a more comfortable background, who would go for those things that you talked about, like the flashy cars and so on. But it seems that in my network, the immigrant entrepreneurs that I know who've moved to a new country, their focus is on the business and that self-satisfaction. And the other stuff comes later on, maybe, but they got their priorities the right way round, I think.
Exactly, because growing up, you are educated to put your schooling first, to put morals first, to put goals first, and to not really worry about the things that will really pass away, because most of the times you don't even have them. You learn to live without them. So when you can get to a point where you can actually acquire them, they are not so important anymore. That's for those who have the entrepreneur mindset. I have friends who are stuck in the desire to make a better life for their families back home. And that keeps them away from jumping in and making the sacrifices, because they'll rather earn a paycheck to pay for the schooling or medical care of their family members, and they just cannot take the risk that we need to take in the startup world. So it goes in two different directions. You set your priorities straight to build that startup, or you set your priorities straight to earn a paycheck, keep that paycheck, and care for your extended family members. I'm of the startup world. I'd rather sacrifice and know that when you delay your gratification, sometimes it's worth it. Most times it's worth it.
For sure. Well, it's an inspirational story, Heine. I think there must be many people out there listening who will probably resonate with your story, who maybe haven't yet started on the journey. So, maybe they're thinking, oh, wow, right, here's a guy who didn't go to Stanford who's doing it. Or, here's a guy who came from Cameroon just like me. Or it could be anything, from the outside coming into this startup world. They may be starting out, they maybe have a lot of doubt. I'm sure you faced a lot of doubt as well at the beginning. How would you advise such a want to be found, or maybe they've already started, maybe they are an entrepreneur already? What would you say to them?
To those who have the desire or who are already working on something and face challenges, be it cultural, social, or any other kind of challenge, I would say you should identify most with those who can build you up and build your vision. Through the process of a startup, you don't have to maintain your relationships. You don't have to stay close to your best friend. You don't have to stay close to your families. I'm not saying you should cut them off, but you should not depend on them for your source of inspiration. You should seek different communities out there. And you can find many such communities online through LinkedIn or meetup.com, or there are many, many avenues to actually integrate and socialize with people that will keep you going when you are weak. If you seek that support from most of your existing network, they will disappoint you. They'll tell you you can't do it. They'll tell you get a job. They'll tell you you need to get your priorities straight. And that's not what you need to hear as an entrepreneur. So you have to identify with those who will build you and keep you going. And sometimes you just have to make the hard choice of marginalizing certain relationships.
That must be really tough as well. If you're coming from another country, often it's those relationships, especially, maybe extended family and so on. That's the only thing you often have at the beginning, isn't it? So I imagine for a new entrepreneur, that's a really tough decision, because you're asking them to step outside of that comfort that they have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why you have very many brilliant Africans or foreigners or people from other backgrounds that are not doing as much or doing what they should, because they are very committed to their past. They are committed to their past relationships, and those past relationships and obligations just make it really hard for them to branch out. But it's a learning process. Some people have it, some people just don't. If you don't have it, then you should not give up on developing that strength on the inside to build those relationships that will foster you. You should always remember that forsaking a specific commitment doesn't mean you've cut it off completely. You're tied to your root. You're tied to your family. You can deal with them at a later time. You can attend to their needs. People's needs and relationships just don't disappear. You just make them what you want it to be. Once you understand that, you can manage that obligation level that really causes guilt for no reason.
Wow, that's great advice. It's fantastic. It's been great having you on the show. I think that
Thanks.
Your story is an inspiration. Where can we find out more about you, Heine?
Thanks a lot, Graham, for the opportunity. I would say the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. A simple search would find me. And of course, the FWIB.me website also has information about me.
Fantastic. I'm sure there are entrepreneurs out there, as I said, in a similar situation to you, maybe a few years upstream, who probably want to reach out, maybe ask for some advice or help. You're cool with that?
Yes, I'm absolutely cool with that. It's normal in the startup community to seek help or give out help. I realized at this point in my journey that the greatest help and support has come from people I never knew.
Exactly. Never knew, but obviously there's a very strong connection, isn't there?
Exactly. They are connected by my ambition. They are connected to the vision. They are connected to the willingness to make a change. They are connected to the technology or the direction. And because of that, they are willing to help, make an introduction, provide support or guidance. And it doesn't always have to be financial. Most times we are looking for help and we think the best help is financial. It helps, but the greatest help is often just the best relationship you can get.
Fantastic advice. Hey, that was Heine Nzumafo, everybody, founder of FWIB, FWIB.me. Find out more about him on LinkedIn. We'll put the details in the show notes. We'll check out his app, website. What a great story. We'll have more like that in future. Thanks a lot, Heine. Take care.
Thanks, Graham. Take care.
Founder FM, voice of the entrepreneur. Find out more at www.founderfm.com.